I walked into my parents' room to find my mom sitting on the edge of her bed, visibly shaking with rage in her eyes. I had never seen her so angry when she turned to me and said, "Your dad got married to another woman on his business trip." I've always been a happy little kid with a loving family and the best father. He was forgiving, optimistic, always helped others, had an awesome sense of humor, and even his looks were great. He was pretty handsome and young looking for his age. Dad's a businessman, and his job requires a lot of traveling. Since we're a family, we move with him everywhere, but there was one time where he had to go on a business trip for 15 days alone, since the tickets were costly during that time, and I had important exams to do for school. 15 days had passed, and Dad didn't come home. Mom called him and asked him about it, and all he told us was that a major problem happened at work, so he had to postpone his return for another 15 days. It wasn't weird for me to hear about it, since this wasn't the first time for him to travel alone for that long. The weird thing was that Dad never replied to our calls or messages during the next 15 days, and we weren't able to get in touch with him at all. Not even once did he call us either. Mom and I were worried, but at the same time we thought, it's all right, he's probably working so hard right now. It was Mom's birthday when Dad finally called to tell us that he was coming back home. Obviously, I was so happy and excited because I missed him so much. He was away for a month already. When he finally arrived, we all gave him a bone-crushing hug. Also, he brought cake with him. Mom even said, "Oh dear, he remembered me." She was so happy. Dad seemed to look even better than he had left, too. His frizzy beard was neatly shaved, he lost some weight and seemed to be in good shape. He cut his hair and dyed his gray streaks black. He was more handsome? I never thought about it, but the change was noticeable, especially when it has been a long time since we saw him. Although it seemed normal, it really wasn't. 5 days later, I was sleeping in my room one night when I suddenly woke up to hear my mom's wailing. She was crying hysterically, as if someone had died. She was saying, "How could you do this to me? Who is she? Who is she? Tell me!" My bedroom's door was open ajar, and I could have gotten up to see what was going on, but I was too scared to do that. Actually, I was more scared of the truth than the fight itself. I did guess what was happening already, but I tried convincing myself that it was a dream, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, Dad was nowhere to be found, and Mom was wide awake. I walked into the kitchen to find her standing at the counter, staring into her cup of coffee. Her eyes were so puffy that I could barely recognize her. It looked like she had been crying all night and hadn't slept a wink. When I asked her where Dad was, she looked at me, gulped, and walked away. I could tell she was about to break into tears again. I didn't get it. Was it true after all? Was Dad cheating on Mom? How? No way. There's definitely a misunderstanding here. Or so I thought. It had been 3 days and Dad didn't come back home. Mom just seemed to look sicker and sicker, refusing to tell me anything about what happened, no matter how much I asked. "Hey, where's Dad? What did he do?" I would ask. She would cry alone in her room. Later that night, Dad came back home. I was awake, but I was too scared to see him, so I pretended to be asleep. I closed the door, switched off the lights, and wrapped myself in my blanket. But then Dad came to my room and switched the lights back on. "Hey, you're awake, aren't you?" he said. I just looked at him in silence. We were both quiet for a second. Then he said, "Did Mama tell you anything?" Then Mom came and said, she heard us when we were talking. Then Dad said, "Come here." I followed my parents to their room and we all sat together, Mom looking like a zombie with rage in her eyes. I asked what happened. Then that was when Mom finally spoke. "Your dad got married to another woman on his business trip. He didn't delay his arrival because of any problem at work. but he was preparing for the wedding. He fell for another woman and she's pregnant too. Your dad has made a new family. Dad just smiled shyly when Mom said that. Well, she was barely able to hold her tears. As for me, I was too shocked to even say anything. And I ended up faking a laugh. Is this a joke? I asked. But I didn't wait for an answer. So I left the room and cried myself to sleep. The next day, I went to school and pretended that nothing happened. But it had, and I couldn't focus on anything apart from that conversation. I had a million questions flying around in my mind, and I could not focus on anything. Why did he do that? Did he not love us anymore? Did I disappoint him? Was it my fault? Mom said she was going to file for a divorce and she couldn't live like that anymore. She said she couldn't bear sharing her husband with some other woman, and she begged us not to feel sad when that happens. At that moment, I just remembered the way we used to be before any of this happened. I never realized how awesome we were until that moment. My friends would always be the ones who would cry over their parents' fights, but me? My parents never even fought that much, thinking back. All I wanted at that moment was to go back to these days, but that never happened. We had to call a family meeting not long after, since I was the only one who knew about it, and my siblings didn't. It put a lot of pressure on me, and my sanity started to crumble even more. They had to know at some point, though, right? So during the meeting, it was all confessed, and we were allowed to ask Dad whatever questions we wanted. I asked him why he did such a thing. All he said was, sometimes a man needs more than one woman in his life. This shattered me. Every question I asked was answered defensively, and they all seemed to be like he was trying to prove he didn't do anything wrong. Darling, it is normal here to marry more than one woman. How, this is Egypt and we are allowed more than one wife. That meeting was terrible and nothing good came out of it. Why weren't we good enough for him? We were all so happy before all of this. It didn't seem to affect my siblings the same way it did me. Maybe they were just too young to understand. Because Dad had 2 houses now, he would stay over at our house every other day while he stays with his other wife too. Mom wouldn't eat nor sleep. Dad noticed it, but guess what? He told me, take care of your mom, okay? Seriously? Wasn't he the one who was supposed to do that as her husband? Now he was burdening me with his responsibilities. Things only got worse for me since school had gotten so stressful. As well as taking care of the entire household, including Mom, while Dad wasn't there, begging her to have at least one bite of something, but she wouldn't eat. I tried my best to make everything perfect, I really did, but things weren't working out well at all. My grades dropped and I would get scolded by my teachers. I would cry myself to sleep every night hearing Mom and Dad's arguments over and over, and I never succeeded in making Mom feel any better. After some time, my dad noticed that I wasn't coping with things very well. He walked into my room, and it was like that first night all over again. Only this time, he sat down on the edge of my bed and put his arm around me. I had so many emotions inside of me, but I couldn't hate him, so I hugged him and began to cry. At that moment, I had hope that something would change. Maybe he still cares about me after all. Maybe I'm not as worthless as I think I am. I told him everything I was feeling, and he listened for so long. But then he disappointed me for the second time. He talked again about how what he did wasn't wrong, nor was it his fault, but it was just his feelings, and that I'm still his daughter despite everything, that he still cares. But these were all sugar-coated words. He never stood by my side when I was at my worst. Throughout all of this, I felt like I wasn't able to do anything to help those who were around me. Right now, I'm depressed about what happened, and I'm still hoping all of this is a bad dream. All I'm asking is to go back in time to when we were a happy family, but really, I know this can never happen. Because of this experience, I now have a lot of insecurities. I feel like I'm worthless. I can't help but think of what I could have done better as a daughter to prevent this from happening. I feel like this is all my fault. I had a great life and never imagined it would end up like this. Sometimes you just don't know the value of something in your life until you lose it. First of all, thank you for submitting your story to Minute Videos. This is not your fault. I know many people might have said this to you, and you still cannot believe them because it just feels like that. Feeling responsible is normally what a child feels when their parents fight or separate, as well as feeling like it's your duty to fix the situation. But it's not. Even a brilliant marriage counselor fails to save marriages sometimes, because some marriages just don't work. It is a very grown-up task, a much too heavy one to put on a child. Your parents are full-grown adults, and as you can see, they don't have the ability to make it work, and they don't expect you to. That is not what you're meant to do, and it does not define your worth. It's completely understandable that this situation affects you emotionally. It is a big change in your life, and the first thing you can do is to accept it. Accept the change and the emotions that come with it. Your disappointment and sadness are normal, and it will pass in time. The change might be forever, but the feeling is not. If you find it hard to believe, try looking at the little things. Before you go to bed tonight, think of 3 things that you're thankful for. It could be as little as an ice cream you had at lunch. It might be hard at first, and you might need to look for it during the day too. But as time goes by and you keep your mind open for positive things, you might be able to appreciate the present much better than you have before. I hope this could help at least a little bit. And if you ever feel like it is too much, let someone know. Even talk to your siblings, as you're going through the same thing and they might feel similar emotions as you do. You can lean on each other for comfort. Be there for each other instead of going through it alone.